Hi guys, welcome to my podcast It's Critical. I'm your host Kritika Singh, and in this episode, we'll be in conversation with Anika Verma, Senior Campaign Manager at Breakthrough India, and Lakshmi Ayagari, a counseling psychologist. We'll be in conversation with them discussing about domestic violence and how it's become the silent pandemic, specifically during the COVID 19 lockdown. Globally, the cases of domestic violence have increased at an alarming rate, and at this moment, countries like Brazil, India, China, Singapore are all reporting increasing number of cases. In case you or anyone you know need assistance, please reach out to the helpline and zonal numbers that's there in the description below. Thank you so much for coming on board and saying yes the moment, I just asked if whether you would be interested in joining and being a part of this. And so yeah, as the first and foremost question, Anika, it's important to know what domestic violence mean. So do you think is it only to do with physical violence as it's seen usually, or what exactly does the purview of domestic violence include?
Legally, the purview goes beyond physical as well. And
Okay.
also, socially, it has to be understood that while physical violence is domestic violence, there are other ways and forms of violence which are inflicted primarily on women and girls because of patriarchal system. That we live in. So
Okay.
domestic violence is also mental and verbal and psychological in very indirect ways of belittling somebody and killing their confidence. That also has a much deeper impact on a person's mental health, which Lakshmi can totally
Yeah.
talk about. But domestic violence is also now being understood in very few spaces as not just being physical. And we also need to capture this whole point that domestic violence needs to be understood beyond just a marital framework, as
Yeah.
in like a woman facing violence from her husband or her in-laws,
Yeah.
because the law also looks at domestic violence in a family setup where it's your own parents
Yeah.
also, your siblings as well. So domestic violence actually has a much broader understanding now, but it has to be talked more.
Do you think, Anika, like you said, that it's not just the physical abuse that takes place, but also mental or psychological abuse that takes place? So, do you think also the impact of trying to overpower your spouse, whether or to overpower even your intimate partners, do you think even that is something that can be considered as violence?
Um, I think firstly we need to understand what the concept or the definition of violence is.
Yeah.
Violence is in comes in various forms. The problem is we understand violence as a direct form of violation. However, it has so many different ways that it impacts people that it goes unseen. I'll just basically define a little bit about what structural and indirect violence is,
Yeah.
and then come down to individuals' um, behaviors becoming violent from there. So,
Okay.
structural violence is where you have an entire system, which is generally a social system or political system that is created, which treats people differently, treats people unequally.
Yeah.
So what that does is, if there's inequality in a system, now be it that system, be a family setup, be a community, be it any kind of religious system, be it socio-political system, where
Yeah.
people are treated unequally, uh, that inequality itself is violence because of the different ways it comes out on the more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Patriarchy is a system women um, uh, obviously unequally, and it looks at women as somebody who's below the man
Yeah.
in a family, particularly. And that's why what it does, it renders women at a more vulnerable and oppressed space than a man. So therefore, when we talk about violence on women, we need to understand it's said in a context of patriarchy and not just one man versus one woman, because
Yeah.
people don't exist in isolation. People exist in structures.
Yeah.
So when we understand the structure, we will start understanding why it kind of permits some people to be more violent towards another
Another.
kind. Here I'm talking about gender. So that's what structural violence creates a space of inequality, and that inequality results in violence. Now, when you say somebody treating their spouse or their family member in a particular way, the question is, are you treating your partner badly because of their gender,
Yeah.
or are you treating your family member or partner badly because you think that they deserve it? But more in more cases, if you sort of look into
Yeah.
where there is domestic violence, it's mostly because domestic violence is also justified because it's a woman. So, a husband slapping his wife, or a father slapping his child, or a brother slapping his sister, it's considered to be normal because they're taking care of them.
Yeah.
So, because of this understanding, it becomes, and not just slapping, even torturing mentally, not physically, but verbally also, taunting them, killing their confidence, berating them in public. All of that actually stems from a very entitled space. And when that space is created, this becomes something very normalized. So that's why when people say, but what about domestic violence on men? Uh, it's a very singular form of violence. There is no layer of patriarchy
Yeah.
and no layer of structural violence associated with it. So, yeah, so that's one way that we need to understand violence, why it exists.
So, Anika, when you said that, there's something that just came into my mind, which is the term protective. A lot of time people use this term and say that, oh no, your father is just being protective of you, or your brother is just being protective of you. So I think, like you said, that we try and layer the entire violence through these keywords and, through these words, trying to make sure that it's taken into a different angle. At the same time, I think this creates a kind of confusion in the mind of the victim and who's going through all of this. So, here, Lakshmi, I would like to ask you this question. How do you think, what kind of thoughts do you think is created in the mind of the victim, and why do you think it's so hard for them to even speak up about something like this to start with?
Um, so here are two factors which we need to understand. One is normalizing the abuse.
Hmm.
Um, many a times victim has been prone to abuse early in the childhood,
Okay.
or they are prone to abuse which is happening around them. Like
Yeah.
whether it be it's happening to their mother or aunt or someone else. They have seen it and they have been thinking all the while, okay, this is normal, this is how it goes on.
Okay.
One is normalizing the abuse. Another is when we look into the thing, when a victim is prone to early adulthood, early childhood trauma.
Yeah.
It is that they build up a toxic dependency on the abuser, with the abuser.
Okay.
They create the normalcy, they create that pattern in their brain, and that's how it goes on for the rest of the period.
Okay.
Another comes like where people do realize that they are being treated bad. That's not the way how they are supposed to be treated. Still, they stick with the abuser cause of the cultural barriers. Because when a person stand up, women stand up and say, like, I'm being
Abuse.
trashed at home,
Yeah.
I'm being abused at home. uh, Many people defend the abuser. They tell it's normal, that's okay if your husband says something like that, that's okay if your uncle says something like that.
It happens in our
So that's a cultural
society.
value.
Yeah. That's
Yes, yes, definitely. And also, uh, dependency with the toxic, and also the fear of being shamed. Like when a woman comes out and talk about it, many a times victim is being blamed. They aren't supported, but they are blamed.
yeah.
So these are the factors which contribute them to go into the nutshell, and they do not like to report an abuse or talk about what's happening with them.
All right. Um, Now, before we go ahead, Anika, you have a background of media and you've worked in films, you've worked in advertising. How did the transition from that to human rights happened?
That's that's a tough one to answer really because it was a slow process. Um, I'd say I used to work in digital media and advertising before I joined the development sector.
Yeah.
But my transition was fairly smooth because I I've been like in the feminist politics since college, and since I learned the word feminism in college, the English literature. Um, but I did not know. I mean, that was just a personal form of politics and a personal way of being. Nothing more than that. But of course, looking at how feminism is also needed in spaces like media,
Yeah.
and having worked in advertising also, um, it made my stand like firmer than it was. So, and also, I'd say the major shift happened in 2012,
Okay.
the Nirbhaya case, where I became very, very vocal online about violence against women. Um, so it was kind of a journey in that particular way. For the next 3 years, I was working hardcore in digital and doing a lot of media and tech kind of work, where we did a project for Breakthrough India, which
Okay.
is where I currently work. Um, so I mean, the kind of work that I got exposed to during that time was really interesting and really inspiring also. But I did not know what to do with it because all of this was new information. Something as simple a thought like that all how do I, like all public spaces
Yeah.
should be accessible to everyone, which is something that I hadn't thought before. This was 2014-15. And then I realized that, okay, this is so simple and yet something which I've never really thought about. Something as simple as why am I so afraid of standing in a bus stop
Yeah.
or going to a Pan ka dukan, because it's always male dominated. But then I started thinking about it that, yeah, why is it? Why am I so afraid of it? Uh, why do I feel that, okay, that space is not for me?
Yeah.
So that's where my sort of thinking started shifting. It was a particular campaign that I was working on for the organization, and for the next 1.5 years, I was assigned to that client, and I absorbed a lot from there, and I got a very we created like this little group with the people at Breakthroughs media team then.
Yeah.
So it became like it was accessible, and we used to work together. And eventually, they asked me to join them, and so I said, yeah, I'll take some time. So I took some time. I took 4 months after I quit my job in the digital agency, and I took up another part-time job uh, at this Peace Education NGO in Delhi, and I was brought in from to work as media and gender sort of person for them, and I got to travel to very interesting spaces. I went northeast of India, which is where the project was also there. And there's project in Kashmir and in Delhi and in working with people from Afghanistan. So it sort of broadened my
Perspective.
exposure
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, on looking at intersections of digital rights, human rights, women's rights, then looking at minority rights. So realizing that it's not no particular movement is complete without the other.
Yeah.
Even queer rights, Dalit rights, all of that sort of intersected for me during that time, and that's where I started understanding that everything that we have to work on, we have to look at it from all lenses. Even ecofeminism, what
Yeah.
very few people understand, something that you, Kritika, have been talking about. That also comes in. Like, how do we look at the planet right now?
Yeah.
Do we only look at saving the environment, or do we also understand the rights of every being and coexisting as human beings also? So
Yeah.
that was also one thing that I learned during that time, and then I joined Breakthrough. So it became like a, yeah, it
Us.
became my life after that.
And it's a whole cycle, like you completed a whole cycle in terms of understanding each and every element and then taking it forward with your campaigns and with raising your voice around it. And interestingly, I think I was introduced to the entire spectrum of it by Anika. I mean, it was a friend's birthday party where I met Anika for the first time, and that's where we got into a conversation. I think it lasted for an hour or so, in my mind, at least, of what I remember. And that's where Anika, you played a special and a very important part in helping me understand these issues, and not just from a point of issues, but as a point where these are important things to talk about, to educate yourself about, and to also raise voice against it wherever you find it in the society. And now, Lakshmi, Lakshmi and I have been batchmates. We've been friends in college, and Lakshmi, I wanted to understand what was the motivation behind you taking up psychology and counseling psychology specifically as your profession?
Um, so honestly speaking, being a psychologist was not a childhood dream at all. It's not even an adolescent thought. Uh, but it's definitely an adult decision which I'm really proud of. And
Yeah,
I'm really grateful that I have been provided with all the resources to pursue this career. And so, looking back, during my childhood, I have always dreamt of being anything and everything on the planet, like I wanted to be a medical doctor, teacher, I wanted to be a police officer, I wanted to be a singer, and a journalist. So these are I remember these five are the very crucial things which
yeah,
were playing on my mind that I wanted to become one of these.
yeah,
And journalism was the very drawn. Like I was so drawn to journalism that yeah, this is how I can make a difference. This is
yeah,
how I can come into the society and make a difference. So with that passion, I happened to pick up mass communication and psychology
yeah,
during my bachelor's. But psychology, beauty of psychology is that once someone starts studying, like reading a textbook, they just fall in
of
love.
course.
So from the semester one, I'm so in love with psychology that I didn't know. So they started my confusion. Do I want to pursue my career in journalism or do I want to pursue psychology?
Yeah,
Thankfully, during that time, I started to volunteer with various NGOs, and I happened to do it because I wanted to do something back then.
yeah,
Gave me a different perspective. Like we were working with underprivileged girls, and most of them I have met, and I have been interacting on day-to-day basis
yeah,
during camps. Are pretty much traumatized, and the trauma is so deep rooted
yeah,
that they need professional help to address it. Like one can't go and sit for 10-15 minutes and tell them ki it's okay, get
yeah,
over They actually need a professional assistance to help them deal with that. And that's when I knew, my heart lies with psychology. I wanted to do this and I wanted to bring up something into the society. That's how I'm drawn here.
Lakshmi, you said a very right point, and when you talk about mental health, this is a completely different thing, which even in college, even though we were psychology students, and it was a time where we were all evolving and we ourselves didn't know much about it. But you got
Right.
that opportunity, you took that opportunity to, understand the mental side of what goes in a girl's mind when you visited them. So, in that case, I want to ask you this question: how important do you think mental well-being is, and how do you think, we can spread more awareness in terms of educating people more on mental well-being and mental health?
Mental well-being is definitely very important thing, and we have to have constant check on our mental well-being
Yeah,
on regular basis.
yeah,
And to spread awareness about it, like, yeah, like very right question asked, like there is a stigma attached
yeah,
to mental health and mental illness, that many of among us, like, despite of our degrees, despite of our qualifications, and so-called prominent roles, professions we are in, many people do not come out and talk about their mental health condition.
yeah,
So like I feel first step lies in coming out and talking. Like that's where the awareness is created, and that's where we understand, acha, theek hai, like, depression is something as normal as diabetes.
yeah,
Like, that's really important. That acceptance towards mental health condition is really important,
yeah,
and that can be done with talking about it a lot, and people like you and me are doing it, and like, I feel many people need to join in this campaign so that word is spread on a wider
yeah.
note.
In fact, in my first episode itself with Nishkarsha, our one of our other classmates, Nishkarsha, and my friend Ayan, we spoke about how normalizing mental health, how important normalizing mental health is, and apart from that, we also spoke of how at times. People don't even realize that they need mental health therapy, or they need to go and address this issue. So we talked about how important it is to, even for your friends and family members, to see if they can recognize that, maybe slowly, and like, in a way where you do not offend someone, get that awareness out and talk about it with your friends and family members. So now coming back to, I think, the main topic of our discussion, Anika, there's one question which is very important at this moment to address from where we are right now. Activists across Germany, Singapore, Brazil to China are seeing an alarming increase in the rate of domestic violence, especially during COVID-19. How do you think the condition here in India is right now?
We recently spoke about it, and actually, Lakshmi was also there when we had that discussion on status in India. Um, which is wonderful because she was also a guest in that talk. As Breakthrough, have been working on creating awareness and sharing a lot of helpline numbers
Yeah,
with more and more people across India, because NCW shared National Commission for Women shared this. I think this was in April. Um, that the number of cases have doubled in terms of number of cases reported to them. So a
okay.
lot of women are reaching out uh, to them more often than they used to. Uh, that's also because earlier, if any woman was facing any kind of challenge in the home space, she had the space to get out, go to either her parents' house or to a friend's house. Um, Basically be a little safer in that particular way.
Yeah,
But obviously, given how you have to be, you cannot step out. Even the police is busy because they also have a lot of work to do. I mean, that's the kind of excuse that's generally
yeah,
given, that they have a lot of work related to law and order during the lockdown. So the unavailability of police, the unavailability of those extra spaces beyond the house. So it's becoming way tougher for women to kind of deal with it right now. And because the abusers are now at home,
Yeah.
that's also a challenge all across the world. Same with India, because a lot of people have lost jobs um, during the lockdown,
Yeah.
during the COVID crisis. Uh, the the number of cases have really shot up, and it's not just husbands. Even if we look at um, violence in the home spaces have gone up. It's also because people are spending more time with each other. The expectations from the woman of the house
Yeah.
have double, tripled up now because she has to do a lot more work than she used to. Because the children are at home, the husband, the in-laws, the fathers, the mothers, everybody is at home, so she has to do uh, double the work. And if she's a working woman who has to work from home, um, that again adds to the pressures. So we at Breakthrough have also been trying to talk about the different lenses around domestic violence. We've been working with our own ground teams who know the ground realities of the issues when it comes to, say, rural or
Yeah.
semi-rural, semi-urban sort of spaces. We have also been working with Khabar Lahariya, which is an on-ground feminist media sort of organization, which has a lot of local women reporters.
Okay.
So we're getting some really uh, how do you say, heartbreaking stories from the ground, because the thing is, while there are a lot of helpline numbers which we are trying to push for,
Yeah.
the issue is, even when you call a helpline number, who reaches you? And it depends on who you are and how vulnerable are you. That even
Helps
if you
will
call a
come.
number,
Yeah.
help will be provided.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of NGOs are trying to work on that. We as Breakthrough don't do casework because that's not our expertise. Neither do we have the mechanism to do it. But what we use is media and other forms of digital platforms, other kinds of outreach kind of mechanisms that we have to share stories, to share helpline numbers, and also do some form of response strengthening with the local governments and also the national government. So that's something the organization has been doing, but it's just that the issue is so vast and there are issues at every level. So even in UP, we realize that while the helpline number may be working, the people who are at the people who are basically taking up the
Yeah.
calls are not so happy with their jobs. They haven't been paid in a while. That they've stopped caring. So what that does is that if somebody is in the middle of a crisis and
Yeah.
is calling the number, that person is expecting help. But on the other hand, if the other person receiving the call is not ready to help them, where does the survivor slash victim go in that particular instance? So there are a lot of these issues. We're also trying to work with larger stakeholders, including the police. We're also trying to work with different organizations on social media. We work with Twitter now closely, so how you can amplify certain issues and
Yeah.
basically ensuring that every stakeholder has their role to play and they're more, um, you know,
Awareness is spread about
they're
the whole
basically,
situation. Yeah. Uh,
yeah,
Anika,
and not to take it lightly, basically.
there's one thing that I would like to correct. The first thing in myself, the first thing is that I addressed it as victim to start with, but when you talked about it, you said survivor slash victim. So I think survivor would be a better word to continue from here. So I would make sure that I consciously use that term rather than victim. And also, like you said that
Sorry,
yeah, Yeah.
one bit about survivor victim dichotomy.
Okay.
You may be not completely wrong, Kritika,
Okay.
because survivor is used for, of course, people who come, like, who faced violence and have sort of come out of it or have fought with
Yeah.
it. Victim is generally used for the deceased, is what that
Okay.
we've been understanding in this space. But the
Okay.
thing is, you can also use the word victim if the victim chooses to, because they're saying that I did not survive this, I'm still going through it.
Yeah.
So even a victim can claim the word victim if they want to. So you're not completely wrong, but it's great that you actually pointed that out.
Thank you. So, Anika, the second question, which is very important over here, talking about the alarming rate. I think I read it in. I think it was one of the posts that you shared that uh, in the first 11 days of the lockdown in India, there were 92,000 plus cases reported of domestic
Yeah.
violence. So, when you are on the ground, you've seen the cases, you've seen the actual victims or survivors of the cases. Anika, and also at the time where you're saying that when someone calls and whoever is picking up the call, it's left on their judgment to decide whether or not this case is critical or this case is something where help can be provided. Where does it leave the people who are calling? Where what happens to the entire audience? 92,000 people in 11 days, and the number is only rising. So I I don't even know how to put the question in the right way, but how and what is happening to these people?
That's where the role of the so-called bystander comes in. Um, Firstly, we need to realize that the vulnerability is different for different women.
Yeah,
It's also because most women do not have access to, the financial freedom as, say, the men in the family
yeah,
do. And I'm using the word most here
yeah,
because most of our country is still very poor. Um, and we don't see it because we live in our elite privileged spaces, so we're like, yeah, well, what poverty, but poverty is real.
yeah,
So firstly that, I know it's a very tough question and very tough answer, but what I'm trying to get at is that whose responsibility is it anyway when it comes to domestic violence? So one is the family itself. So if you see anybody anywhere, if you see that there is some form of violence happening, stop calling it mia bibi ka jhagda,
yeah,
because a lot of people say that this is a fight between a couple. The thing is, it's not a fight, it's violence, it's familial violence, it is domestic violence, intimate partner violence, which has to be stopped. The other thing is, people say that it's not my business. If somebody else is going through it, it's not my problem,
yeah,
it's not my business. That mindset has to change, because violence is everybody's business. Okay, it's not about because it's not happening in my house, I
yeah,
should not stop it. So if anybody is hearing it, because many times people are so loud that you can just, right now, quietly go wear your gloves,
yeah,
go ring the bell and come back. So what you can do is, you can immediately stop the violence if it is happening around you in your neighborhood.
yeah,
The other thing is, if somebody do reach out to people that always um, have known or have seen some kinds of signs
yeah,
or have picked them up, please reach out to them and ask. Generally, don't mention violence, but just say how you doing, how are things at home, all of that, and tell them that you're there as a support system. And I know, because now the lockdown is more flexible, you
yeah,
can physically go and help people. But the thing is, just do not be so blinded by your own self that, yeah, if it's happening to somebody, it's not my responsibility. So everybody has this responsibility. And the worst thing is, if you notice, and I'm sure Lakshmi can add to it, if it's if there are children in the house who
yeah,
are, who are witnessing all this
yeah,
violence, um, many times, even if the children are older, they can also intervene. But sadly, if the children are much younger,
Yeah.
it becomes all more hard. So I'll just quickly give you an example of what happened a few weeks ago. So one of our colleagues, she had to go and rescue somebody, and this is during the peak lockdown time, when
Okay.
the police was very strict about movement and all of that. We need to get passes and all that. This is that time.
Okay.
So we get a call from this girl, and we, as an organization, can't help.
Yeah.
But she went there because she was about to get killed by her in-laws and husband.
Okay.
And the reason she could not do much about it because her parents lived in like they lived really far away and they're not in Delhi, and she had two very young daughters. So
Okay.
the whole fight was about not producing sons, and that became a reason for them to become violent towards her. They used to be violent, but this time it got so bad that she was about to like literally get killed for it, and so were the children. So I don't understand like the courage that it took even for that woman to come out and call up the helpline,
Yeah.
and then people reaching out, a lot of negotiation happening. Like they had to literally threaten his family because the police said that we can't do much, we have so much work, and this is a family matter, we can't help her. So then it became really tough. So somehow people had to get her out of the house and sent her to a shelter home. Then because she did not have money, so some of us got together, raised funds for it, and so that she could at least survive
Yeah.
during like another week or 10 days. So all that was happening, and we were still thinking that in this during this time people are ready to kill uh, their own family members. So
Yeah.
it was quite, and the thing is, I'm not going into details, but it was something that was super heartbreaking. And the sad thing is, it is so common. It is so common that people don't talk. People don't realize how common domestic violence is, and because this was physical, we were able to take action. But the other forms of violence, when it's mental, when it's verbal, when it's non-verbal also,
Yeah.
there are indirect ways of being violent.
Yeah.
Then what do? Women and people, girls become suicidal. There was also a very young girl, she's 19, who reached out to us and she said, I just want to talk to somebody through text, through WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And she explained everything, how her father is so abusive towards her, and she's stuck with him because she's also dependent on him for money. So
True.
there are so many of these cases, but the thing is, what one can do is um, solution wise, there are quite a lot of solutions, but I mean, if they were working, we wouldn't be here. But largely, intervene when you hear and see violence and reach out to people. Use your privilege.
Yeah.
Uh, and also, community action. Like, if I hear something and I tell you
Yeah.
that, hey, listen, I think we need to intervene, and you then call Lakshmi and
Yeah.
Lakshmi calls another person, we become a sort of a support group
Yeah.
of people who can, in whatever way needed, we
Yeah.
can go and intervene. So that's something, one more thing people can do.
Anika, like the example you just narrated gave me goosebumps, to be honest, because it's something that, we having said, like you said, that, we are privileged. We are sitting at a place where, we just see and read about it in newspapers and then forget it, right? The next Instagram post that we see, we are over the previous news. But the main impact, the actual impact is, it's huge, from both negative point of view and also positive point of view, which we can create if we create a support group. Like you said that, if one person reaches out to someone else. Now Lakshmi over here, is something that I really want to understand from you, because we often don't talk about this, and that is the mental health of an abuser, or someone who's actually suppressing someone else's voice. How do you think we should, as a society, look at catering to the mental health of the abusers?
Um, so first thing, we should stop normalizing the aggressive behavior. Um, it is like, when a child throws up something at home and he shows tantrums, around laugh at it. I don't know why many find it cute or gooey. They just tend to normalize it.
Yeah,
And once this same boy reaches the school, he probably get into physical fights there. And this pattern continues. This
yeah,
won't stop unless and until someone says that child, beta, what you're doing is wrong. This is not acceptable behavior.
yeah.
You are harming or hurting others. Like, this need to be told when the first instance is noticed.
Okay.
Many a times, we as a family members or extended family normalize that behavior. First thing. And later, like, once the child grows up, like, as I told, many a times victim is prone to abuse. Like,
Yeah,
she might have faced abuse by herself early in the childhood,
yeah.
or she must have seen the
Abuse
abuse
happening.
around.
Yeah,
Same case, yes. So same case with the abuser. So, like, they have been seeing their dad ill-treating their mother, or they are seeing their uncle ill-treating their aunt, or many a times son ill-treating the mother.
yeah,
So they tend to grow up seeing these patterns, and they do not even differentiate how respecting women feels like or
yeah,
looks like. They do not understand that, because this is how the environment whole their early childhood and adolescent have been. And when suddenly we talk about respecting partner, respecting other women in the society, for them it come as an alarming thing. For them it come as something out of box, and we are asking for too much, whereas it is not. So, as a society, we have to stop normalizing the even slightest of the aggressive behavior. That's one thing we can do. And another thing, when someone reports an abuse,
yeah,
we definitely need to look into the mental health condition of an abuser. Quite a few times, abuser may be a narcissistic personality, antisocial personality, or borderline personality disorder. They may be diagnosed or they may go undiagnosed. That's entirely different topic. And it's not like everyone who is fighting a mental health condition is having a trouble relationships, and
yeah,
everyone is going to turn out to be abusive. It's not that.
yeah,
But there are high chances that abuser may show these personality traits.
yeah.
In this condition, there is definitely a professional who has to be involved to draw healthy boundaries. We may not eliminate the context completely. At least we can work on the things and draw healthy boundaries and the healthy family environment.
Got it. Um, Anika, over here, like, when we talk about how we can see and notice if this abuse can happen, or like, somewhere abuse, how mental health of even an abuser is important to look at. Uh, how do you think someone who is at home sees signs, or can spot signs of early abuse from someone else on them or to someone in the family? I think I'll just,
This is for me or
sorry, I'll
Lakshmi?
reframe the question and ask, I'll cut it here. The question is actually for Anika. So, the question is that, how to identify how to, oh God, wait, just, I'm so sorry. Um, the question is for Anika, how to identify or spot the early signs of abuse, either on them or on someone in the family being abused.
The thing is, and I'm sure Lakshmi could also add to it that firstly, um, there are both. There are patterns that one can see and observe, but the problem is many times those patterns are not so symmetrical. So it sort of becomes really tough to then understand, because a lot of people know how to hide their aggressive abusive side so well. So sometimes you don't even get to know that this person is problematic or abusive. So that's where it becomes a little tricky. But on the point of how to understand abuse, so we can, I mean, in the child rights space, there are certain guidelines which are already given, and they came out during POCSO, the framing of POCSO as well, about what are the signs of abuse that a child, particularly, and child as in anybody
Yeah.
below 18, um, uh, can display. So one thing is that somebody changing, and if somebody is facing it, their personality sort of going through a very quick shift to somebody who used to be an extrovert and suddenly becoming an introvert.
Yeah.
Somebody who was fairly quiet and reclusive either starts oversharing or stops sharing at all. Somebody who's absent a lot from spaces, from college, from school. Um, I mean, these are like the bigger signs, but the little signs you'll see is, it really sort of depends on that person's situation and how that person is taking the abuse. Many times people stop hanging out in larger groups.
Yeah.
Many times people become averse to loud sounds. Um, so, I mean, there are these different ways. The thing is, when you see that shift in somebody's personality, and even if you see a little, anything little, like a bruise or like an injury, please ask them. Because many times people will also lie about the injuries. And that's something that I recently discovered with a friend of mine who, you know,
Yeah.
again, who's not very, she lives in a very privileged sort of family, and general understanding is that domestic violence doesn't happen in privileged families, but that's a misconception. It happens everywhere in every family. It's not just a poor people problem as it is made out to be. Um, the thing is, you get to know that it's a poor people problem because they live in smaller houses
Yeah.
and it's easier to hear. But the thing is, it is everywhere. So I found there was a little cut she had under her eye, and she had hidden it with makeup. So I asked her that what happened, and she's like, oh, nothing. She made up a story, and I said, okay, I'll come back to you on that. Um, and then when her husband was not around, I asked her again, what happened? And I said, you don't have to hide. You can tell me if this is an actual bruise or was it given to you by someone. Um, and she's like, Arey, but how do you know? And I said, I just know. It's okay. Let me be wrong. It's about you, not me. You tell me if something bad has happened to you and if he did something to you. And she kept hiding it so much. And then eventually it came out that the husband had hit her just like the previous
Yeah.
day. So, I mean, there are these different things that you can, and sadly, here I'm talking about physical violence because that is what it was. It was more visible,
Yeah.
but mental violence becomes way tougher to sort of understand. But like I said, I personally cannot, give more yarn on this because it's really really tough. Even in the human rights space, it has been discussed and talked about from the child rights perspective, from women's rights perspective, but uh, other than the certain guidelines, it's not really talked about because the issue is mental health is seen as a very separate entity
Yeah.
when it comes to violence. Your mental health is only looked at as you have a mental health problem if you're an abuser and who somebody is so aggressive, or you are somebody who has gone through so much abuse. That's when you develop mental
Yeah.
health issues. But the thing is, mental health issues exist in so many different ways,
True.
but it's not really talked about, even addressing something as common as domestic violence.
Yeah, and in fact, when it comes to mental health, I think it's just the way, we go for regular body and physical checkups. It's in the same way that we require to go for regular mental health checkups. Yeah, before we go ahead, guys, we'll do a small rapid fire round, and I'll ask one question to Anika first and then to Lakshmi, and these will be one words. Whatever comes to your mind, just share that thought with me. So, Anika, your first question is frog. First word,
Prince.
prince. Lakshmi, sustainability.
Oh my god. Okay, this is my spontaneous reaction. Hard work.
Okay, Anika, want.
Desire.
Lakshmi, desire.
Oh god. um, Need.
Are you guys trying to finish the want, need, desire cycle over here? Um, I think Anika, the next one is sustainability.
Lifestyle.
Lakshmi, need.
Oh god. Need. Honestly, no, nothing comes to my mind.
Need.
Can I pass this on?
You can say mental health, therapy. You can say anything around that. But, or you
You
can,
see, I'm on a hot set and my brain is just frozen.
yeah, maybe you can say a phrase or sentence if you want to. But okay, I think I'll pass here. You don't get any marks here. Um, Anika, desire.
Sexuality.
Interesting. Lakshmi, frog.
Frog. Well,
Okay. Anika, money.
Empowering.
Lakshmi, money.
need.
Anika, need.
Uh, Nature.
Lakshmi, want.
Want. Desire. Okay, did I tell that already?
I said it.
Anika said it. Okay, so I think the entire rapid fire became like a frog prince and a well story. And let's see how it ends up to be when, I close the research from all my rapid fire rounds and then what comes out of it. Um, so now, as part of our last 2 to 3 questions, Anika, the next question is for you. What is intersectionality, and what role does it play in violence and abuse and towards women, to be specific?
Okay, I recently did this. Uh, Really cool that you asked me this. So, intersectionality is firstly, we need to understand the history of the word.
Yeah,
In the 80s, there was this professor in the US, Kimberly Crenshaw, who said that when you talk about women's rights, when you talk about the second wave of feminism, you only talk about a certain kind of woman.
yeah,
And in the US, it was always the white women problems. So the feminism always looked at what a white woman's experience of the world is. So she said that while the thing that connects us is our gender,
yeah,
the thing that also makes our experiences different is our race or our ethnicities or our the way we look. And then she came up with this whole understanding and whole breakdown of the word intersectionality, where there is an intersection of your multiple identities, social identities that you hold. So, under intersectionality, it's not just about being a woman, but you also need to understand, are you a Muslim woman? Are you a black woman? Are you a Latin woman? Are you a Dalit woman? Are you an Adivasi woman? So all of your other kinds of social identities, which are religious, ethnic, tribal, caste, class, sexuality, gender, everything sort of comes in, because while it's nice to say that, oh, all women are women, all women face violence, all that,
Yeah.
but there are some women who face violence a lot more than the others,
Yeah.
because it is not coming from the place of gender based violence, but it is also coming from class and caste based violence. It's also coming from religion based violence, race based violence.
Yeah.
So, understand, and it's not just for women, the intersectionality applies for every person.
Yeah.
It also applies on your age, that if you are a young woman or an older woman. Uh, because everybody's experience would be different, and the problem is we understand women as only one kind of person, entity, and everything that happens to her, matlab everything happens to every woman in the
Yeah.
world. That's what a problem is when we, and that's a stereotype that gets built, and we need to understand those stereotypes also need to be challenged when you're talking about intersectionality as well. That when I say, um, as a, say, I'll say, as an upper caste woman, as an upper class woman, I don't think domestic violence exists. Um, the thing is, I cannot say the same for all upper caste women and upper class women. The only difference is that if a woman of privilege speaks out, she may have a higher chance of being heard.
Yeah.
So if, say, somebody like me, while I can continue saying, "Ki, oh, this doesn't happen,"
Yeah.
but if, say, somebody like me goes to a police station and says this all has happened to me, the police will still file an FIR. But many times, what we've seen on the field, if you're a poor woman, and especially if you're a woman of the so-called non-dominant caste,
Yeah.
your FIR, like your report, is also not even registered. It's also because of, again, intersectionality.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of Dalit women in our country face sexual violence because not just of the gender but of the caste also. The whole thing about that her body is disposable and can be used by anybody because she doesn't belong to an upper caste. That understanding also has allowed a lot of people to violate Dalit women every day. But the thing is, because it's so normalized, and it's not just about raping her, it's also about how you talk about a Dalit woman,
Yeah.
also about how you address her, how do you represent her. All of this has to be understood when we're talking of intersectionality. And the thing is, it is all there. It's all about just opening your mind and being critical to seeing that it exists. So, the when you say how it plays a role in the violence against women, like I explained, one is you don't you're not violent towards the woman only because of her gender.
Yeah.
It's also about uh, where she's placed. So, is she does she earn well? Is she an earning member of the family? So, while you will, like, the person who has to abuse her will abuse her,
Yeah.
but the chances of her leaving are higher than the chances of a homemaker are. So this kind of intersectionality also plays out but the thing is, intersectionality, while it talks about individual identities, it applies to the larger society, which most people fail to see. People still think of violence as a very one-on-one issue,
Yeah.
which it not. It is a it is socialization, conditioning of many many years, and because all of this comes into comes into us through various means, right? If you're born a man, you're given a certain kind of entitlement. you're given a certain kind of position in the society, which you do not realize because you take it for granted,
Yeah.
and because of that certain position, you are able to violate people who you feel are less powerful than you, primarily your wife, your children, a person who's younger than you, a person who's of a so-called lower class than you or lower caste than you. You end up doing all of that without realizing that you were sitting in a position of privilege. But the thing is, when you say that this guy had beat up somebody else or this guy was torturing somebody, you we end up talking about just those two people without
Yeah.
understanding the years of patriarchy and privilege that this person has enjoyed, and that's how it's also coming out. It's very complicated, and I know one podcast is not
Not
enough
enough.
to sort of go into, yeah.
That
But
is why, Anika, I think,
something,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you were saying something, Anika.
No, but I mean, I'm sort of like done on the intersection. Like I said, intersectionality is
Yeah.
way bigger than I can explain in one podcast, or we can go and explore in one podcast. But just the basic
Yeah.
understanding that it's a hierarchy of social identities.
Yeah.
If we need to talk about it, we need to start looking at it from that lens. And there's the whole thing that we've all heard that, okay, I'll use a very simple example here. The whole idea of how I can go, like your domestic help
Yeah.
and you.
Yeah.
There is a clear hierarchy. You're an employer, your employee. You're of a certain class and caste, and she's of a certain class and caste.
Yeah.
You live in a certain society, she lives in a certain area which is not like very privileged or very clean, or like all the stereotypes. I mean, but they exist
Yeah.
because that's the reality of our country. So if both of you are sort of together, and you need to take a stand for her, you will be better heard than she would be. So and this is something you can totally see if she's facing some kind of an issue, and you as an employer
Of
or
course.
as another woman go and help her, you will see that how like मेम साहब की बात ज़्यादा सुनी जाएगी, uh, and not of the person who's actually facing it. So there is an inequality even within women, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's right there. It's in your everyday life. So the point is, how can you still not see it? So intersectionality talks about that.
And Anika, you rightly said that, this podcast is not enough to, get into the detail and deep dive into the related topics and concerns. So, there's also something else that I'd like to do, which I'm doing for all my other episodes, which is after the the podcast is going to be out in the directories, there will also be an article that will go out on the website, and over there I'll take your help and Lakshmi's help to put in some more information around these topics, and some videos, some articles that can actually help the public to go and read more about it. And of course, that brings me to the next question for Lakshmi, which is social media. And Lakshmi, how do you think, with the work that you and Anika are doing, how impactful social media currently is for, voicing out or reaching out to more people?
I feel it is quite impactful. Matlab, I keep sharing lots of mental health related posts and articles on my social media walls, and I write my own blog as well. And the way I have understood it, many of my friends and their friends, like they are being actually educated from it.
Yeah.
Matlab, many a times we think, okay, they have gone to college, they have got these degrees. Probably these people must be aware of this particular scenario, like any mental health condition like PTSD or bipolar or something.
Yeah.
Whereas when I write something about those, reactions will be in immense number. They tell me many more things where I just think, "Acha, I did really good thing writing about it or talking about it," because many a times people do not understand that as we assume them to be understanding it. So uh, regarding any topic, whether it be domestic violence or any issues women are facing, or even it's a mental health condition, it's very impactful coming out and talking about it.
And I was reading recently that, vernacular languages across the globe is going to be the main mode of, sharing content online by 2024, to be precise. So, Lakshmi, you have done some work with Breakthrough India, where you and Anika had collaborated, and you have spoken about domestic violence and mental health in Telugu. And also, Anika, you have worked in the space where you have brought in other Indian regional languages. So, how do you think? Because as you said, half majority of our country is still in an area where, 70% or more of our population is still in the rural areas. Reaching out to them is equally important when it comes to talking about mental health or domestic violence. So, vernacular languages, how much has that helped you in propagating the message? Anika.
Okay.
Um, I think Lakshmi can answer that better because she did this video for us in Telugu,
All right.
where she talked about domestic violence and mental health together. But I'll just give you an example of what we do at Breakthrough and we trying to
Yeah.
push for. The regional languages beyond Hindi.
Yeah.
Because yes, in India, Hindi is supposedly, at least in the North India, it's supposedly, of course, the most spoken language, and people are trying to push it as the national language, which I do not agree with, because that's not the reality of this country.
Of
Every
course.
state, every region has its own language, and uh, it's best to use that and not just use Hindi or English.
Yeah.
While we right now speaking in English, I do realize and reflect on that as well. But if you talk, your communication can go in various ways,
Yeah.
and that's something that one has to keep in mind. Um, so our response, say, I'd say with Hindi, Haryanvi, Jharkhandi has been that a lot more people came on board. A lot more people wanted to volunteer also. So that's something that really, really helps when you reach out in local language because people feel a little more empowered in their own language,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of leadership we need to sort of foster, and not just go top down saying no, but you have to speak Hindi, you have to speak
Yeah.
English, otherwise you will not be heard. And this is why we need to sort of democratize communication also, and I mean communication for everything, for issues, for entertainment, everything. It has to be way more democratized than it is right now, and this Hindi position firstly has to stop.
Yeah.
But talking from a space where I am sitting, it's primarily Hindi, so it has online, it has shown a lot of, like, it has a wider reach. More people share it and talk about it than people in English. And but the thing is, English also solves its purpose in a different way
Yeah.
because it kind of unites people across India, especially in the south, especially in the northeast,
Yeah.
where people can access English as well and not just. But the point is, your communication can't just be in one language and should not be in one language, and we need to accept and respect that about the country and its people. Because the thing is, you kill confidence when you talk in only one language, which is not of somebody's
True.
everyday life.
And it also shows, that connectedness, like you said, that you've seen more people coming on board. So it is a sense of connectedness that they share, and eventually, no matter which language they choose to communicate with you, the idea is to make the other person comfortable. And if through your language you can break that barrier, I think it's very important to look from a communication point of view, to look at vernacular languages. um Lakshmi, as one of my last question, from a mental health point of view, what is that one message that you would like to, give to our listeners, and before we end the episode?
Thank you so much for this question, Kritika. One message I would give is do reach out. Do reach out. Um, if you feel you are suffering, you are affected with something, do reach out to the trusted people, whether it may be your friend, family, or anyone.
Yeah.
And if you feel any of your friends or extended family members or family members are not doing good,
Yeah.
do reach out to them as well. Check with them. Yeah, talk with them on regular basis. And this sense of realization that we all are together
Yeah.
and we take care of one another while we travel is really important to have a healthier society.
True. All right, Lakshmi, Anika, thank you so much for coming on board and accepting the invite for the podcast. And I'll be sharing the helpline numbers just in case if someone who's listening to the podcast or to the video wants to seek help or to call someone in need, someone when they are in need. For them I'll be sharing the helpline numbers. In case someone wants to connect with you, I'll also be sharing your social media handles or the Breakthrough India's website details so that people can reach out to you directly. Lakshmi, I'll be sharing your social handles also so that if in case someone needs mental health assistance, they can reach out to you. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching this episode, guys. And in case you have any queries, you can write to me at itskrtikal@gmail.com. In case you want to reach out to Anika or anybody at Breakthrough India, the links are in the description below. If you want to reach out to Lakshmi, the link again is in the description below. To know in detail about domestic violence and mental health related to domestic violence, please visit www.itskrtikal.com. It's www.itscritical.com. Please write to me, like, share, comment, subscribe, and happy listening and watching.